Welcome to the Board Sup channel. I'm Jay Pinkster, and joining me today in the studio is an award-winning paddleboard designer, the CEO of Honu Paddleboards, Mark Travers. Welcome.
Thanks, Jay. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's exciting to have you. Now, in 2019, you purchased Honu Paddleboards. It was a very different company back then. Tell us about the boards and the business, what it was like.
Yeah, actually, it was a really great little business. It was started by a French backpacker, actually, in 2001. We took on the brand because we thought the products and the manufacturing were quite well sorted, and that I would bring a more of a marketing and customer service focus. And that's why we thought that my skills plugged in quite well with it. It was a very much a mid-tier brand, dare I say cheap and cheerful, but very family orientated. We did longboards, short surfboards, composite paddleboards, and inflatables with a whole range of products.
I believe your partner at the time, Megan, said, don't change anything.
Yeah.
But you didn't do that. You actually grabbed a handsaw and one of your boards and went in the backyard. What happened next? I love this story.
Well, I was under pretty strict instructions from Meg. She said, just run it as is. But I think that I wasn't really quite sure how things were made, and I couldn't get very clear answers out of our then manufacturing partner. So I grabbed a composite paddleboard and one of our surfboards, and I took it out in the backyard and I dissected it from nose to tail about every 6 inches, so I could basically get like an internal scan of how the products were made. And I remember sitting around the kitchen table and I was looking over at Meg and I was sort of scratching my head and I said, I don't like it. I don't like it. And she said, oh, Krusty, what do you mean? I was like, well, I don't think the board was made as well as I thought they were.
What did that do for you? Because, one, not many people would hack into their own product.
Yeah.
But two, for you, it sounds like it was a crisis of integrity almost.
I, in my very core, don't think cheap product and cheap things. I truly believe it's a false economy. I think that a high quality product like this t-shirt that I've worn like 1,000 times is always going to be way better value than cheaper product. And so it really sort of forced me to sort of say, well, look, if I'm going to do it, I have to do it properly. And Meg, to her credit, said, all right then.
So you stopped manufacturing composite boards, and then you had to teach yourself how to create an inflatable board.
Yeah.
Yes. And you're an engineer by trade, so you had that background.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how you approached the task of learning how to make inflatable paddleboards.
It was quite difficult, and lots and lots of midnight oil, as you would imagine. A couple of trips to China and various places in Asia. And what I did is I made some good connections. I met some industry veterans, and they sort of started linking me through to various people. Once I'd actually worked out the material part of the equation, I then sort of dived into the construction methods and actually, as you would expect, looked at what everything was currently being done and thought, well, how can I make this better? Because I don't think this is as good as it could be, and then started on that process.
That question seems to be something that just drives you. I've known you for about 18 months, and it just seems like it almost keeps you up at night that you have this uncompromising part of your personality. Is that it's a blessing and a curse?
It's non-stop, and it's in my house, it's in my garage. I walk past things in my garage. I think I can make that better. That could be better, and it is a constant driving question. How can this be better?
Is that the engineer in you, or is that your personality, do you think?
Well, I think one leads the other, doesn't it? But how did I become an engineer? I probably had a particular way of thinking. And in fact, I say this to young people studying engineering, that engineering in itself is a particular way of thinking. And I do approach product design from an engineering lens, maybe a little bit clinical, some might argue, a little bit clinical. And hence, that's why I bring in very talented creative people to do some of our things like colours and styling, because I'm very, very much stuck in the weeds of 3D design and construction methods and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there a unique process or a unique way Honu produce boards, do you think, compared to other high-end boards in the market?
Yeah, look, and not to sort of drop other brand names, but I think there's one other major brand that constructs their inflatables very similar to us in terms of the welded rails, although we come about it from a slightly different way. But in terms of the combination of our material that is made for us under special sort of order, and then our construction method for our rails, that is actually pretty unique to us. There's only one other brand out there that's doing things that are comparable.
And how long does it take to create a Honu paddleboard?
In manufacturing?
Manufacturing.
At least 6 days. At least 6 days, because at each stage, it gets left and it gets inflated and gets left and checked for leaks and various other things. So, and there's also multiple QC stages that go along with that. And then we actually, at the very, very end of the process, they do a final check and a final cleanup of everything, and the whole process is videoed. And we video all the details in the board, all the rails, and they get logged against the serial number, and then everything gets sent through to me to spot check if I want. But because I actually have people working for us as the brand in the factory, we have not many problems. So yeah.
And I believe you're one of the only paddleboarding companies that pay people by the hour rather than per unit created.
Yes, the factories and the manufacturing partners we have, all of the technicians and staff have a healthy wage. They are not remunerated by units, they're remunerated by quality and attention to detail, and they end up working on a product because they've become very good, and so we as a brand look after them as well, as every which way we can.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah. Like I have to say that there's two guys. There's two guys that do the welding. They solely are dedicated to doing the welding on our boards. It takes two of them, and it goes very slow and they're very careful, and they're absolute masters at it. But,
while we're talking about welding, tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah.
I believe you and one other paddleboarding company are the only people doing it?
Yeah.
Or
there's a handful. There's a handful.
But why does it set a paddleboard apart? Why is that process so significant?
It's a good question. There's a strip. There's various ways to do it. The way that we do it is we actually heat and pressure weld a 25mm strip over the inner rail join. The reason why it's so good is because it's a mechanical bond. It's not a chemical bond. So a glue bond is a chemical bond, and that can break down over time, and it can hydrolyze and other things can happen. Whereas a PVC that's been mechanically bonded through heat and pressure, it's virtually one thing. In fact, our failure rate in the last 2 years with welded rails is 0, and our leak rate is exceptionally low. So
that's
we've
remarkable.
Just seen, yeah. So it's a safety factor, and it's an interesting question because sometimes I've been asked, well, why don't you do dual chamber boards, which is and that's a great, interesting design, but I've chosen not to do that in favour of our designs, because introducing that second chamber actually introduces more potential for failure, leaks, you name it.
Absolutely.
And so, without a shadow of a doubt, the safest thing you have out there in the water is common sense and actually the board you're on. So as long as you're attached to it, you're pretty safe. So
yeah. And you've had a strong environmental focus right from the beginning with Honu, haven't you?
Yeah, I keep it pretty quiet, but I think first of all, and I really truly believe this, and again, I think a quality product is the most sustainable product you can buy. Lasts longer. It will always have a secondary market.
It's not going to end up in landfill.
Not going to end up in landfill as
months.
Quickly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but we do a few things. The way we package our boards is mindful. We use tissue paper and we use lots of craft paper, and we really avoid as much plastic as we can. We also do things like repair boards for people. So even if it's
like when they rip a fin out going down a river. Like if they,
Yeah, no, exactly. And look, I have personally repaired boards that people have done very naughty things on, and there's no way it's a warranty.
I put my hand up for that.
But I actually don't mind it, and it always feels like I'm putting something good out there into the world.
On that, Honu has exceptional customer service, and that's something you pride yourself on. And you often answer the phone.
Yes.
So when people are calling from goodness knows where at early hours of the morning for you answer the phone.
Yeah, and sometimes they're often surprised. They're often surprised. But, you know.
See, I as an introvert,
Yeah.
I would hate that. But you say you love the direct
I really
feedback.
enjoy it. I really enjoy it. I get to hear what people are asking. I get to get their reactions to certain things. And I also get to solve problems. And I think that brands and companies are always really judged by how they deal with problems. And we have problems, like things go wrong, you know, there's stuff. We live in a complex world, right? And it's the way in which you respond to and work with somebody who's having a bad time or a problem. I think that's what sets the difference. And I think I have very old school views about customer service. And it's really simple as this, that if we have a customer that has a problem with a bag they bought from us, doesn't matter, and it's really gone wrong and it's set them up for big problems. If I can solve that in some way, even be generous in the way that I solve it, it's not about the cost of that one solution. That to me is an investment in a future advocate, a future brand ambassador, and it's about them becoming 10-year customers. Yeah, 10-year customer, not this transactional. And I think that particularly in the last 3 years post-COVID, lots of brands are pivoting into all weird and wonderful spaces. And so it's funny, I'm kind of almost like digging in to the paddleboard market.
On that, you came into the paddleboarding market at a unique time. In many ways, the paddleboarding peak had already passed its peak, and then you had COVID, then you had tariff wars and logistical problems, let alone the design stuff that we've talked about in the manufacturing and getting your head around how to create beautiful paddleboards. It hasn't been easy for you.
It hasn't been easy for anyone. The world's been a mess since COVID, and it's only, I think that what I'm seeing is just a stabilising now. So I think, you know, there's a lot of political tension right now in the world, but I think that we're getting close to maybe a world that's a little bit more of a level playing field. But yeah, so what are we, 4 years on? I think it's just starting to settle.
And you're a small paddleboarding company, and your production cycles are very small, which means it's allowed you to be nimble and to change your products quickly. But the downside of that is you occasionally run out of your products and have to have pre-orders. But how is it a blessing and a curse being a small paddleboarding company compared to the Reds and the Starboards and some of the other companies that are just massive global companies?
Yeah, look, I think for me the biggest frustration, and it is a frustration, is our inability to move fast enough, because we're not VC backed. We don't have huge pools of money or people for that matter. And so even when I have a strategic direction, it's a very slow process. And so I'm not able to, my MBA professors would tell me I'm not moving fast enough. And that's probably a frustration for me. The flip side of that coin is that the oversupply of, say, paddleboards post-COVID, last year, some of those brands you mentioned were still selling boards they made in 2019 and 2020. They'd been warehoused for years, sitting there, which is not good for any product. Still selling through that inventory. We didn't have that problem because we do carefully demand plan and we do sell through things fairly often and regularly. And in fact, we're about to be, I think we're about, as we shoot this, we potentially are going to be sold out globally for about 6 weeks.
What are some of the challenges of running a paddleboarding business in 2025?
Yeah, good question. I think that there has been a vast influx of brands and companies making sort of low to medium cost product. They really flooded the market. That's triggered many brands to diversify in all kinds of some weird and wonderful ways. One of the brands in particular is doing an inflatable hothouse, which I thought was really interesting. Certainly diversified, but everyone's doing their thing in some way to deal with the influx of product onto the market. I've taken a different approach, which was just to really hunker down a little bit. I'm calling it the Stephen Bradbury approach, which is whereby I am letting a lot of things fall down out there in the market and for it all sort of go a bit haywire. And I'm going to be sort of left standing.
Last man standing.
Last man
when
standing.
It counts.
Yeah. And I think I said it earlier that I have been thinking about different ways of pivoting and becoming more of a lifestyle brand is a really common, one approach that some of the brands have taken. I have made the decision that we are actually going to double down on paddleboarding. And in fact, we're going to do something that I didn't even think I was going to do as recently as 12 months ago. And that is we're going to go back into producing high quality, high performance carbon fiber composite boards. And in fact, that's actually one of the things I'm up to right now.
That sounds really exciting. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I want to talk for a while about this board behind us, the Honu Bondi. That was where I met you. I think about 18 months ago, it came on my Facebook feed. And I remember thinking, that'll never work.
Yeah.
And then I looked at it and I saw the fin construction and this welded rail around the back of the board.
Yeah.
I thought, hang on a minute, a surfer has designed this. I know the guy who designed this is actually a surfer.
Yeah.
And that's when I reached out to you and said, hey, can I review the board?
Yep.
What made you design the Honu Bondi?
What made me design it was there wasn't a decent surfing SUP out there that was inflatable. There was one that was pretty good, I have to say, Starboard, credit where credit was due. But I didn't think that there was anything that I thought was really fantastic. And so I kind of, as I do quite often, set myself a core premise, a question. And I was like, how close could I make an inflatable surfing SUP to a composite board? And that was really the premise of the question. And I sort of started down a road of thickness and rocker and had to solve several problems along the way, or design challenges, not problems, Jay, they're opportunities to get
opportunities that keep you awake at night.
Yeah, exactly. And one of them was, how do we get this sort of really wild rocker and actually make it so that the board stays in that rocker? And many folks wouldn't realize this, that most inflatable boards, the actual board itself is trying to push the rocker out.
Trying to flatten
itself out. And so the construction on the Bondi is really quite different. In fact, everything is trying to pull the board into its rocker. In fact, the only way you can see it and prove this claim I make is that actually when you suck the air out of it, the whole thing tries to like curl up like a shell. And that's because of the way we've put the carbon into the rail and onto the top and bottom. So that was just this sort of idea of like, well, how close could I make it? And and I think I'm pretty honest. I don't think it's as good as a composite board, but I think it's pretty close, and it's not a million miles away. And if you were going on a surfing trip to Bali or Hawaii or somewhere like that and you wanted to take a board, I wanted it to be the board that you would take.
It's certainly been there. Yeah. Around the world.
It's all over. It is everywhere. It is the far-flung countries that the Bondi is in is quite extraordinary.
My friend Courtney and I took it to California and surfed up the coast of California. Then we took it down a river and to Lake Tahoe. And it just became the go-to travel board. We loved it. The back end of the board is remarkable with the welded rails, and really that's where all the action happens when you're surfing. I remember you gave me one to review. I paddled out at head-high reef break and I thought, I really don't know if it's going to spin out at the bottom of the wave or just I'll be diving for oysters. I did not know what was going to happen. And I'm paddling into a wave, just wondering what's going to happen. And I was able to hold a rail and drive down the line. And it really gave me the same stoke as just a composite board. Yes, you can't turn quite as sharp, and you need to plan your turns a tiny bit earlier and all that sort of stuff.
But it can do a bottom turn.
Yes.
And I think that's the big difference. You can do a great big, pretty dynamic bottom turn, which really, that sets everything up. And
it gets you onto any kind of wave. It is just a wave magnet, that thing. So I believe it took over 18 months of design and something like 13 or 14 design changes.
So the board itself took about 9 or 10 months, and then just the fin setup took another 6 or so. And the fin box in your board here, that's version 14, I think. So we would design the fin box, which is designed to fit the board in that position on that side. So again, it's holding the rocker. So you can't put our fin boxes on any other board, even our own boards, they just don't work. And so we would do the design, work out how close it was, destruction test it. It's like, oh, we broke that, that's no good. And then we would go back and iterate. And so I think, V14 is the current live fin box design.
So let me test you with your own haunting voice inside your head. If you look at that and ask the question, can that be any better?
Yeah.
Have you got any plans for
Yes.
redoing the Bondi?
Yeah, we do. In fact, I was nearly going to say it, and I stopped myself from saying it. But the 2026 Bondi production boards, their fin boxes are V15.
Wow.
That's an expensive hobby, by the way, because you've got to redo the molds, the whole lot,
Yeah.
and the molds are, $4,500 US. So yeah, every time you do that sort of thing, it's expensive. But there's a process, right? And I'm actually in this process right now with a new paddle blade, where we'll go through the design, the 3D design, and I'll actually then 3D print it so that I can physically see it. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to mount a 29mm carbon tube into a 3D printed heavy old, blade, but I'm actually going to go paddle it and test it. And the idea is that by doing that, I'm trying to avoid making multiple molds because it's very expensive.
Speaking about your paddles, not enough gets said about your travel paddle, the 4-piece.
Yes.
That is insane. I've seen 3 YouTube reviews of it, and they all said this is the best travel paddle. It's so light. I think it's 20 or 30% lighter than most on the market.
Yes.
No twist at all, and no clicking or movement. And it fits inside most travel bags. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, it'll fit in an overnight bag.
Yeah, I keep it in my car all the time because I paddle 3-4 days a week. And I just have it in my car. I just pull it out, click it together, and off I go. It's fantastic. Let's talk about the Honu Sorrento. That was an award-winning board for you. I think it was 2022, 23. You won the world's best sup.
Yes.
That must have been a pretty amazing feeling, being in the industry for only 3 years, punching up against these people who have been in the industry for decades. How did that feel?
It was so amazing. It was funny. I was upstairs in my home office, and as a brand owner, you never get a heads up on what is happening, what they've said, or what anybody is going to write about you or say about you. And I was up in my office, it was late at night, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and I was watching that video, and I remember specifically, I'm doing these ones at my screen, like watching the guys at Supboard Magazine, and I'm literally like rubbing my temples going, oh, what are they going to say? What are they going to say? What are they going to say? When they said something about, the award goes to, they said the Honu Sorrento, I leapt out of my chair, like very similar to what we did when we won the Sydney Olympics. It was kind of that kind of thing.
Yeah, euphoric.
I could not believe it. To say I was wrapped is probably an understatement.
So it's been described by many in the industry as the lightest and stiffest touring sup on the market. I have the 2025 model, and it's just a bullet in the water.
Yeah.
But the thing I love about you is you won the award, but you're already going, how can I make it better?
Well, actually, when that board won the award, I'd already scrapped that design and was working on the redesign, and I was actually having some troubles. At that time, I wasn't 100% sure we had a new Sorrento in train. So yeah, I've flown pretty close to the sun a few times with product, designs and iterations. That was one of the times.
So tell us about some of the refinements to the Honu Sorrento, the 2025 model. I know you redesigned the nose, giving it a sleeker nose and a little bit less rocker.
Yes.
And it just slices through chop and any kind of wake on the water.
Previous board that got tested, it's basically one of the stiffest boards that was ever measured. And the only other board that was ever so slightly stiffer in the water was actually about 4 kilos heavier. And so what I thought I could do is, what if we could make it a little bit more stable? I actually was willing to compromise some of the performance to make it feel a bit more stable. So that's kind of what, again, was a hypothesis. Can I do this with the Sorrento? And that's when I went through and said, okay, I want to reduce the material thickness. That one was a bit of a gamble because the material, even the depth, the thickness on the Sorrento, nobody makes that material in any flavor whatsoever. It was a gamble. It was almost like a desktop review of, well, I think if I reduce it by a centimetre, it's going to do X, Y, and Z. And I actually had to back it and go into production on that basis. But so I did that. Plus, yeah, like you said, we sharpen up the nose, reduce some of the nose rocker just to increase the waterline length. And yeah, I think I'm really happy with the result.
And you added removable cargo straps, which was a
yes,
great idea. So when you don't want them, you can just take them off the board really easily. And yeah, it looks amazing. Paddles incredibly well. Let's hope you win an award with that one as well.
Yeah.
Is there a trend in your design, do you think, to come a little bit thinner and to bring the rider closer to the water?
I'm a big fan of trying to get people standing as close to the water as possible. Here's the thing, Jay, right? It's really easy to make a stiff paddleboard. It's really easy to make a light paddleboard. It's very hard to make a stiff, light paddleboard. And I think that's the crux of it. And one of the questions you should be asking is, why isn't it being copied? And the short answer is, it could be, but it's really expensive. It's expensive material. It's hard to work with. And so you have to have the right sort of mix of people to be able to do that. And then obviously the price point makes it sort of not for everyone as well.
Rigidity and light boards is, you know, the bullseye you're going for. How does that translate into a better ride for most paddlers? What does it feel like when you're on the water?
Well, it feels more responsive. It just feels easier to move around. Obviously being connected to the water, you feel more, you know, attuned to what's going on. And then when that board is nice and light and maneuverable, particularly swing weight off the nose, it'll turn easier in the water, and you just feel like you're more paddling with your board instead of, you know, sort of wrestling with something that's big and heavy under your feet. And I think that's the translation, and it's a night and day sort of feeling and an experience out on the water. I would always encourage people to beg, borrow and steal a good product as opposed to trying to sort of go cheap and cheerful and just try and understand the difference.
Yeah, it's like comparing an inflatable beach toy with a high-performance paddleboard. There's just no comparison, is there?
It's difficult, you know, and obviously more affordable product will always have its place. But I think that, you know, and I think this with bikes, paddleboards, speakers, you name it. This is what I universally think, that if you can't afford to get something quite good, it doesn't have to be the most expensive, then I would argue, and I think that you're better off trying to find something in the second-hand market as opposed to getting something that's disposable from one of those big box retailers.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I want to circle back. Earlier, you said you were hoping to go into the composite market.
Yes.
And I got to admit, I got pretty excited when you said that. Tell us what you're planning for 2026.
You touched on it earlier, that the market's been really difficult and different brands are doing different things to diversify. And I had really come to a fork in the road, I think, a few months ago. And I think for me, it was a choice of, do we become more of a lifestyle brand and expand into more sort of adjacent things? And for me, the other choice was to double down on paddleboarding and really invest in the sport and, you know, invest in riders, clubs, you name it, really, really get actively involved. And I've decided to do the latter. So I'm doubling down. And that means we are working on brand new paddles for 2026. I'm working on a high performance carbon fiber composite surfing sup. I'm also working on a longboard sup, because who doesn't need a longboard? And we'll also be releasing a 14-foot, again, composite carbon fiber raceboard, and we'll be putting these out into the market 2026 with team riders, magazines, you name it. And so that's what you can expect from us in 2026.
Very exciting. And with the composites, how far down the design process are you?
So I'm at the 3D design stage. So product design for me normally starts at 2D sketches, then 3D design, then depending on the size, we would 3D print things. I don't think I'll be 3D printing a surfing sup, just to knock that idea straight up. So at the moment we're in 3D Pro, you know, design, and I'm not going to tell you some of the details I'm putting into it, but suffice to say, our surfing sups will look unique, and there'll be some very defined features about them that will make them so very obviously ours.
Well, Honu have such a distinct design and always look unique. So that's something to look forward to, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned that you want to develop team riders and the whole presence on socials and that sort of stuff. What have you got planned for that?
I think from Honu in 2026, you'll see us involved in more local clubs through sponsorship and various support that we can give them to help them develop people in the sport and promote the sport. We will also be supporting team riders and competitors around the world. In fact, I've got it loosely earmarked for various locations and disciplines around the world. But I'm right now actually in the process of talking to various people and getting sort of prepped to do that. And it's really a big part of my strategy going forward is, supporting grassroots riders and clubs, and not just in my hometown, but all over the world.
There you go. You've heard it from Mark himself. Send your CVs, pictures, videos to Honu Paddleboards and say, sponsor me. I think you're right. There has to be support for the grassroots level, but also the high-end athletes who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Well, that's very exciting, Mark. Thank you for coming in the studio today. Really looking forward to seeing what you develop in the composite range. And thanks for all the investment you've made in paddleboarding in Australia and around the world.